In this video, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite sequencer plugins, Stepic, and how you can use it with the Elektron Digitone, or really any other external gear. We'll recreate the opening track from scratch, and I'll show you some of the ways I like to integrate Stepic into my music workflow. So let's get started. Okay, so let's first create a few patches on the Digitone so that we can sequence them using Stepic. Feel free to skip ahead if you want to get straight to the sequencing. I'll start with an evolving pad sound. We'll do that over on track 3. So in the amp envelope, we'll do the classic pad setup of a long attack and a long release. We'll also add some decay time here, and we'll add a little bit of drive. In the filter, we'll also set up a very similar envelope. And we'll start by rolling off the highs a little bit, adding some resonance. And a little envelope. Great. And in the second filter menu, we'll adjust the base filter to roll off any of the extreme lows and extreme highs, and just give things a little bit of room. So our other patches will fill these spaces, and I found that this particular pad can get a little resonant, so we also want to catch that early. Okay, so in Synth 1, we will use algorithm 2, and we'll tune down the carrier and the A operators a little bit, and we'll just increase the B by about a fifth, so 7 semitones. We'll center the mix into both sides, add a little bit of feedback and detune, and we'll adjust the harmonics over to A and B and make it a bit more of a sawtooth. Great. Now in the Synth 2 menu, we'll increase the A operator and adjust its envelope a little bit, give it a bit of attack, and adjust things a little bit there. Now in the second menu of Synthesizer 2, I like to see how turning off the phrase reset sounds. Sometimes it gives the sound a bit more of an organic feel, as it lets the also just free run. And I think in this patch we'll do that. So right now we're sounding like a little bit like this. That's already pretty nice, I think. Now to add a little bit of movement, we'll go over to the LFOs, and we'll add a bit of filter. We'll adjust the filter resonance. So down here in the filter, and we'll slow that down and make it random. And then we can increase a bit of depth until it sounds how we'd like it. Sounds all right there. And in our other LFO, we're going to make it adjust the harmonics, also using a random and a slow BPM. So let's dial that up a little bit. Nice. Now this wouldn't be much of an ambient pad without some effects, so let's go to the effects menu. We'll drench it in reverb, add a nice amount of delay and some chorus. And while we're here, let's adjust the delay settings. So function delay gives us this, and we'll turn on ping pong, give it some width, and increase the feedback. And we'll also send some of the ping pong delay into the reverb. So now it sounds a bit more like this. All right, so now we need a couple plucks. We'll start with an ARP, which will serve as our baseline layer. So I'll put that on D2. And in here, we're already in the amp menu. So let's make this a pluck by just dialing out all the sustain. Just increase the decay a little bit. Great. Add a little bit more drive. Just drive a little bit more crunch to the sound as we progress. Now in the filter, we'll keep the envelope as it is, and we'll just roll off the highs a little bit, add some resonance, and we'll increase depth all the way up. Gives us which will give us a more plucky sound as we move away from a sine wave. Now, in the synth menu, we're going to use algorithm 7, which gives us more of a dual voice, but with a little bit of feedback from our operators. We'll increase the mix about halfway. And we'll turn up the A operator by about an octave. And in the harmonics, we'll shift the carrier wave to more of a sawtooth. We'll add some detune, not too much, and some feedback. Sounds like that. Now in synthesizer 2, I'm going to turn the A operator all the way up. Makes it a little more crunchy there. And we'll adjust its envelope so it modulates that sound a little bit. Cool. Now in the LFO, we'll modulate the detune a little bit. Very good. And in our effects, we'll add some reverb and a bit of chorus. Now, since this is going to be an ARP, we need to enable that. So we'll function ARP, and it's turned on. And we got to adjust a few things in the ARP menu. So we'll go over here to the ARP menu, so Shift Synth 1. And for this, we're going to increase the range to 2 octaves, and we'll keep the speed at 16ths. This track has a pretty slow BPM, about 80, so 16ths sound pretty good here. And if we just try this now, it sounds okay, but it's fairly repetitive. And we can adjust the sequence settings here to make it sound a bit more interesting. So first of all, we'll change the length from 16. We'll turn it down to 11, and this will give it a bit more of a polymetric feel as we adjust these other settings. So from here, we will, let's increase one of these sequence steps by 12 semitones. And a few of these other ones, we'll just disable those from playing back. So now when we play a chord, this will create some variations in the sequence and keep it moving. And now we'll create the lead pluck for this track. And for that, once again, we go to the amp menu and we dial out all the sustain, give it more of a pluck sound. In this case, we're going to give it a bit of attack. And we'll add some drive to that. And we'll add some effects. So we'll add some chorus, add a little bit there, add some delay. And of course, some reverb. And the filter, we'll roll it off a little bit. Add some resonance. We'll keep the envelope as it is. And a little bit of envelope. And in the second filter menu, we'll roll off some of the lows, which will let the bassier sound of the ARP track through. Okay, so over in the Synth 1 menu, we'll again use algorithm 7. And for this track, we'll turn up the B operator an octave, and we'll shift the harmonics of the C operator over to more of a square sound. We'll add a little detune and feedback, and we'll move the mix over about 25%. Now over in the Synth 2 menu, we're going to turn up the level of the A and B operators. So we can turn that to about 92, and the B operator to about 75. And we'll make that operator a little bit more plucky by just dialing out the sustain on that and just keeping the decay around 33. And in the B operator, I'm going to give that a long decay and attack. So we'll turn that up to about 18, and we'll turn the sustain down to about 62 and increase the attack to about 97 or so. Nice. Now for this voice, we're going to modulate it externally by using the velocity to affect some of the settings. So we'll go into the voice setup menu, and we'll scroll down, and for this, we're going to turn off the velocity to volume setting. So now velocity will not affect, will not change the volume of the voice. However, we will go into the velocity mod settings. And in here we have 4 different lanes where we can adjust different parameters on the voice by the velocity. So in our case, we're going to adjust the harmonics for the synthesizer. We'll dial it up a little bit. And we'll also make velocity adjust the filter. And we'll turn that up pretty high. Now, these keys aren't velocity sensitive, so nothing is going to change right now. But that'll show up a little bit later once we use Stepic to sequence the settings and have it modulate velocity as it plays. Now, a couple last things to do on this voice. We'll go into the LFO, and we'll use the LFO to modulate feedback a little bit. Feedback. And we'll slow that down. And we'll also slow down the speed of the LFO down to about 8. So since this is more of a lead sound, I'd like to fatten it up a little bit by adding some unison. So we'll turn that on to 2 voices, and we'll turn the spread all the way up to about 42. And now it sounds like this. And those are our voices. Now I'll switch over to the DAW and show you around Stepic. So what is Stepic? Well, It's a very powerful step sequencer plugin created by DeviceMeister, and it's available as a VST and as an Ableton Max for Live plugin. And it works on both Mac and PC. There's a link below for more information. Okay, so here we are in Ableton. Like I said at the beginning, Stepic is available as a Max for Live plugin and as a standalone VST. I could use either, but it has slightly deeper integration with Ableton's automation systems by using the Max for Live plugin. Now I already have Digitone set up using Overbridge into Ableton right here. And I could pull Stepic directly in as a MIDI device, like so, and it would communicate to Overbridge. But by doing it this way, we're limiting ourselves to just using track 1 over MIDI channel 1. So I'm not going to do it that way. Instead, I'm going to use different MIDI tracks in Ableton to control the different MIDI channels on the Digitone. So we'll pull this Max device over to MIDI 7 here. And in the MIDI output, we'll change it to the Digitone, which I already have set up as a MIDI device. And we'll send to channel 1 on there. I'm also going to disable any MIDI inputs to the Overbridge track. And we'll just leave this as our main audio input. Now for our first voice, which is going to be our sort of lead, we can load up Stepic, and it looks like this. So at first glance, really any normal sequencer, we have 16 individual steps and settings for each step. This first row gives us gate control, so whether or not a step will get played. This second row lets us pick a note to be played in the sequence. Down here we have chords, so each step could play a multiple note chord, which is useful for arpeggios or any time you need a chord, really. This row lets us control what octave the note is within our ±2 octave range. And this final row gives us various other options for each step. So this duration setting lets us control how long the note is played. Velocity, of course, lets us control the velocity of each step. Swing lets us control how much each step is swung from 0 up to 75%. Divider lets us introduce ratchets to each step, so we can have the note played once or up to 4 times within a step's note length. And note repeat lets us play a note multiple times, and in doing so basically causes our sequence to extend much further than the 16 predefined steps. All of these settings can be randomized, and all of these settings can be played randomly as well, which gives us lots of options for generative sequencing. Up here in the main toolbar, we can customize our scale and root, and we can also control both how many steps are played in the sequence and how long each step is played for. So for this lead, we're going to set that to 1/8 notes, and we'll change the scale to natural minor. And now that we've changed the scale, the options for pitches in this row have now shifted to the notes that are available in this scale. So if I were to change for a different scale, we would have different notes available there. Now we could easily come in and pick a few notes, but I'm going to reset that, and I'm just going to hit random until something looks interesting to my eyes. Yeah, that could be good. And duration, I like to turn it down a little bit. In this case, we're just going to be playing a pluck, but in some instances, having the MIDI notes be to full length can cause some issues. And I'll go to the velocity, and I'm going to randomize that and pull them up so they're not all the way off. So for the velocity, I'm going to set this to randomization mode. We have 3 settings that we could use here. So we have no random, so each step will be played incrementally. So we have this green setting, which tells Stepic that it can play any of these steps randomly. And it's also allowed to repeat a step, so it can stay on a single step, playing it over and over again. And this purple setting tells Stepic to always play a random note and never play one note twice in a row. So if we press play now, our Digitone will start playing this sequence. Let's give it a listen. First, I'm going to add some randomization to the octaves. So we'll just tell it to occasionally play 1 or 2 octaves up. And we'll also set that to a random mode. So that'll give some movement to everything where the notes will play different octaves. And in the step settings, we have every note played at all times. So we'll move along and we'll just play the same note. Now we could add a bit of variation by randomizing which notes get played, but we can look at some of the randomization settings for each gate as well. So right now we have the random mode engaged, which gives us these little dice icons. And we can check those on. Maybe not the first one, but we can set these other ones. And this will give Stepic full control over whether or not it'll play particular notes. And there's no control over the probabilities here. It's just a straight random. So if we press play now, we do have some other random settings. So if we click the next one, this setting gives us a percentage probability. So we can control, if a note is already set on, we can give a percentage chance that it will not play. And if a note is turned off, it gives us a percentage chance that it will play. We also have this other setting here, this blue setting. And this gives us a feature that's very similar to like a 303 sequencer, where the note will continue playing but can change to a different pitch. So if I turn some of these notes off, and increase their probabilities a little bit. Now when we play, it should be very similar to just having the dice, but this gives us a little bit of finer grained control over whether or not the steps get played. Now both of those were pretty similar, but this final setting is called fix. And what this is very similar to the elektron sequencer mode, where you can control probabilities per iteration of a sequence. So when a step is off, we can control how many cycles of the sequence are required. So when a step is off, we can use this setting to control how many cycles of this sequence are required to cause the note to play. And when a step is on, this setting tells Stepic how many cycles of the sequence to play this step before it won't play it. So in this instance, we'll give these disabled settings a few cycles to play. So now when we play, it's going to take about 3 loops or so for a step to come on. I quite like this setting. It gives the sequence some space, makes notes a little sparser, and it's going to let the other voices have room to breathe and room to play. So I think I quite like this. I'm going to leave this on this setting. What I think I might also do though is adjust how many steps are in play. So I'm going to turn this down to 9 and maybe turn this down to about 10. So now we're going to be constrained to this set of notes, and then these steps will get played. And since we have more steps enabled than pitches, this will make the sequence roll a bit more and give a little more variation to the theme. And that's our first voice. So now that we have our lead voice set up in Stepic, let's set up some settings for our ARP and pads. We'll create some new MIDI tracks and add Stepic to each of those, and then route them to the appropriate MIDI channels for the Digitone. This one goes to channel 2, and this one to channel 3. So since we've already gone over the Stepic interface, let's go and look at some settings I created earlier for our other voices. So these are the settings for the arpeggiated voice, and in this case I've got it limited to 9 steps with just a few disabled. We're still in C minor, and we're down an octave for this one. I have a few octave steps enabled, and the velocity is randomized. And I have a few note repeats, so the effective length of the sequence is a fair bit longer. In this case, I'm using the chord settings for the steps, and I've enabled different notes to represent different chords in our sequence. The pitch that gets selected here becomes the root note for the chord. So if I change this step, you'll see the chord editor moves around and my chord shape stays the same. In this case, I've picked different chord shapes, which will give us some nice variations. And that's the arpeggiator. We can just solo that, and it sounds like this. And finally, for our pad, I've got things set up slightly differently. For Stepic, I've got each note length set to a whole, and I have a nice random sequence defined here. I've shortened the length of the octave steps so that we have a greater chance of an octave change. Otherwise, everything is set to defaults. Instead of using the chord editor, I'm using Ableton's built-in chord effect, and that's constrained to a key using Live 12's new scale feature. So each of these notes that comes out of Stepic will pass into the chord module and create additional notes using these different scale degrees. We have 2, 4, and 7 degrees that can be added. I'm also using this setting down here with chance. We have different percentage chance that each of these notes will get added to the chord. So when we cycle through each of these notes in Stepic, we'll get variations on these chords using these scale degrees. So if I enable that, the track sounds like this. And that's Stepic, sequencing the Digitone. There are many more settings we could go into. I haven't even touched the automation settings yet, so if you'd like to see more videos with Stepic, especially if you want to use it with Digitone or any other external gear, feel free to leave a comment down below. But otherwise, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.